Welcome, seventh graders. This is Miss Maya Talks podcast, and I am Miss Maya. And today we are going to be talking about energy flow in ecosystems. So let's get to it. Energy flow in ecosystems. Do you play an instrument in your school band? If so, you know that each instrument has a role in a piece of music. For instance, the flute may provide the melody while the drum provides the beat. Just like the instruments in a band, each organism has a role in the movement of energy through an ecosystem. A bluebird's role, for example, is different from that of the giant oak tree where it is perched. But all the parts of the ecosystem, like all the parts of the band, are necessary for the ecosystem to work. Energy roles. An organism's energy role is determined by how it obtains energy and how it interacts with other organisms. Each of the organisms in an ecosystem fills the energy role of a producer, consumer, or decomposer. Producers. Energy enters most ecosystems as sunlight. Some organisms, such as plants, algae, and some bacteria, capture energy of sunlight and store it as food energy or chemical energy. These organisms use the sun's energy to turn water and carbon dioxide into food molecules in the process called photosynthesis. An organism that can make its own food is a producer. Producers are the source of all food in an ecosystem. In a few ecosystems, producers obtain energy from a source other than sunlight. One such ecosystem is found in rocks deep beneath the ground. How is energy brought to this ecosystem? Certain bacteria in the ecosystem produce their own food using energy in a gas, hydrogen sulfide, that is found in that environment. Consumers. Some members of an ecosystem cannot make their own food. An organism that obtains energy by feeding on other organisms is a consumer. Consumers are classified by what they eat. Consumers that eat only plants are herbivores. Familiar herbivores are caterpillars and deer. Consumers that eat only animals are carnivores. Lions and spiders are some examples of carnivores. Consumers that eat both plants and animals are omnivores. Cows, bears, and other things like humans are considered omnivores. Some carnivores are scavengers. A scavenger is a carnivore that feeds on the bodies of dead organisms. Scavengers include catfish and vultures. Decomposers. If an ecosystem had only producers and consumers, the raw materials of life would stay locked up in the waste and the bodies of dead organisms. Luckily, there are organisms in ecosystems that prevent this problem. Decomposers break down wastes and dead organisms and return the raw materials to the ecosystem. You can think of decomposers as nature's recyclers. While obtaining energy for their own needs, decomposers return simple molecules to the environment. These molecules can be used again by other organisms. Mushrooms and bacteria are common decomposers. As we have discussed, energy enters most ecosystems as sunlight and is converted into food molecules by producers. This energy is transferred to each organism that eats a producer, and then to the other organisms that feed on those consumers. The movement of energy through an ecosystem can be shown in diagrams called food chains and food webs. Food chains. A food chain is a series of events in which one organism eats another and obtains energy. You can follow the food chain from one organism to the next. The first organism in a food chain is always a producer, such as a tree or grass. The second organism feeds on that producer and is called a first-level consumer. The termite in this example would be a first-level consumer, eating the tree. Next, a second-level consumer eats the first-level consumer. The second-level consumer in this example might be a woodpecker that eats the termite that eats the tree. Food webs. A food chain shows only one possible path along which energy can move through an ecosystem. But just as you do not eat the same thing every day, neither do most other organisms. Most producers and consumers are part of many food chains. A more realistic way to show the flow of energy through an ecosystem is a food web. A food web consists of many overlapping food chains in an ecosystem. You can trace the many food chains in a woodland ecosystem by following them to make a food web. Note that an organism may play more than one role in an ecosystem. For example, an omnivore such as a mouse is a first-level consumer when it eats grass, but when the mouse eats a grasshopper, it is a second-level consumer. Just as food chains overlap and connect, food webs can interconnect as well. While a gull might eat fish at the ocean, it might also eat a mouse at the landfill, which would be a dump. The gull then is part of two food webs, an ocean food web and a land food web. All the world's food webs interconnect in what can be thought of as a global food web. Energy pyramids. When an organism in an ecosystem eats, it obtains energy. The organism uses some of this energy to move, grow, reproduce, and carry out other life activities. This means that only some of the energy it obtains will be available to the next generation or next organism in the food web. A diagram called an energy pyramid shows the amount of energy that moves from one feeding level to another in a food web. You can see an energy pyramid in lots of different locations and in lots of different environments. The most energy will be available at the producer level of the pyramid. As you move up the pyramid, each level has less energy available than the level below. An energy pyramid gets its name from the shape of the diagram. It's wider at the base and narrower at the top. In general, only about 10% of the energy at one level of a food web is transferred to the next higher level. The other 90% of the energy is used for the organism's life processes or is lost to the environment as heat. Since about 90% of the energy is used or lost at each step, there's not enough energy to support many feeding levels in an ecosystem. The organisms at the higher feeding levels of an energy pyramid do not necessarily require less energy to live than do the organisms at the lower levels. Since so much energy is lost at each level, the amount of energy available at the producer level limits the number of consumers that the ecosystem can support. As a result, there are usually few organisms at the higher levels of the pyramid.